to be talking about basic budgeting and your credit score, and I'm 100% with her that if somebody had taught me a little bit about this when I was first graduating high school and getting started with college, I would have made a lot better decisions as well. Budgeting and expense tracking is what we're going to talk about first. And just kind of as a basic budgeting 101, a budget is a list of your income and expenses over a set period of time. And a lot of people think, well, I don't really make a whole lot of money, so it's not really worth it for me to make a budget. But the reality is that no matter how much or how little money that you make, it is important for you to have a budget because you need to know where your money is going. And if you know where you are now, it is a really good first step into knowing how to get where you want to go. So it's really important no matter what your income level is. And an important thing when you're talking about budgeting is not to compare yourself. You could have a coworker that is in the same position as you, and you know that you make almost the same exact amount of money or the same money, but your budget is still going to be completely different from theirs. Everybody has their own set of special circumstances. They have different interests that they want to save for. Some people have pets that they need to consider. Some people have family members that they take care of. So there's a lot of different aspects into making your budget yours, and it's unique. So don't try to compare yourself with others. Your budget is for you. And before you ever budget, you need to get organized. So you need to know what money you have coming in, as well as what money you have going out every month. So it's important to just kind of get all that down on paper. Sometimes you have an existing checking account that you can use to tally what you have coming in and going out. Sometimes you really just need to think about what you've been spending and get it all down on paper. When you are creating a budget, you also need to look at a time frame. 1 month is a general good rule of thumb, and the reason for that is because a lot of the bills that we pay happen once a month. So that really helps you to know what you're going to be paying out each month, because you usually do that once a month. You pay your electricity bill once a month, you pay your rent once a month, or your mortgage. So that's a really good time frame. Some people do it per paycheck. That will help them out as well. Some people get paid once a month, twice a month, but you have to kind of find what works best for you. And then you have to have a method that you're going to use. There's a lot of different ways that you can organize your budget. We'll talk a little bit about that coming up. And then make sure that you categorize everything, which your budgeting tools will help you categorize all of your income and expenses as well. So on the income side, know everything you've got coming in. And when you think of income, you automatically think of your paycheck, but there's a few other things that you might have applicable to you as well. Some people have student loan refunds, grant money, scholarships. When those come in at the beginning of each semester or each school year, that is going to count because you're going to be using that to pay for school supplies, sometimes living expenses, and sometimes food, things like that. So you have to include that as part of your income, even if it just comes in that one time. Some people have assistance from their parents or guardians to make it through college or even after college. So if you have a regular set of money that's coming in from that type of source, you need to remember to include that as well. Another thing, when you're thinking about your income and your paycheck, a lot of people work in service jobs where a lot of their income is tip based. And we understand that tips aren't the same every shift, every week. They change depending on the volume of business. The good rule of thumb when budgeting out what you're going to have when you don't know what it's going to be is to budget for what's called the lowest case scenario. So when you are working at a restaurant and you're working on tips, you know, based on your experience at that job, what you make when business is the slowest. Like if you work on Wednesday nights, you know you're probably going to make a lot less than you would if you worked on a busy Saturday or Friday night. So when you're creating your budget and you're estimating what that income is going to be, think about what you would make if business was the slowest. That way you can account for all of your expenses if you were on that low end of the income, and that leaves room for you to have more because you probably will. But if you don't, and every shift you work is on that low end, you still have all of your bills accounted for. and you don't leave yourself short. Moving to the expense side, every single expense should have a category. You may have several different categories, you may have just a few, and it's going to depend on your circumstance again. Some categories may not apply to you. I have 2 dogs, so pets is a big expense category for me to think about, but that may not be a part of your budget. One of the basic things to remember about a budget is the 4 walls, the things that we need to take care of first in our budget, and that's going to be shelter, clothing, food, and transport. So shelter is going to include everything from your rent or your mortgage to your utility bills. Clothing, you always have to have clothes to wear. You don't necessarily have to have new clothes all the time, but you need to make sure you are clothed. We have to feed ourselves, and then of course we have to make sure our transport is covered, and that's going to be anything from our vehicle payment, our gas, our maintenance, or maybe we just take the bus and we have to make sure that we have bus fare for the month taken care of. So those are going to be some of your most important categories. And I understand at this point, maybe you still live at home, or there's certain expenses that your family is helping you out with that you're not responsible for at this time. It's just really good to understand that when you do get out on your own, those are things you are going to need to account for. So even if you're not accounting for them at this time, that is something you're going to want to think about for the future. Saving is another really important expense category. You always have to pay yourself. And we'll talk a little bit more about saving coming up, but it is an important category. And then recreation. Recreation is obviously not essential to living, but we all have to have a little room for that in our lives. Everybody's going to have a little fun every now and again. So we always want to make sure that we make room for that in our budget, because we've got to pay our bills and we've got to save money, but we have lives too. So we always make room for those in our budget. And then you also do want to consider irregularities. So certain months out of the year, you're going to have holidays, presents to buy for. You're going to have also times where you have like vehicle maintenance, or you have an insurance bill that you don't pay every month, but you do know that it comes up at least a few times a year. So that's another really good reason to have that 1 month time frame, so that you have this little section in your expense categories for what's going to be occurring that month, like once again saving to buy presents for Christmas or something of that nature. Okay, so a little bit ago we talked about what's your method. You can track your budget in a various number of ways. It can be as simple as jotting it down on pen and paper. There are various printable templates that you can download from the internet that have preset categories for you to fill in. You can create an Excel spreadsheet. Excel is very handy because it basically adds and subtracts everything for you if you get it set up right. But there is also a lot of different apps and programs that help with this. If you look at just kind of some of the photos here, we have got a few really good ones that I've found that are free, and that's a really important thing. I would not put any extra money out for a budgeting app, because you can do this so many ways that you don't pay for. EveryDollar, Clarity Money, and Mint, they are all free apps that you can download on iPhone and Android. They are absolutely free, and they help you keep your budget intact and on track, and it's at your fingertips. I mean, we've all got our phones on us 24 hours a day. Intuit is the creator behind Mint. They're also the company that does QuickBooks, and they have their own tax program, so they definitely know what they're doing. It's a really good app. I have had some experience with Clarity Money and people who use it and say that it's a little bit more user-friendly, but I really encourage you to download one or a few of them and check them out, decide what works for you. You can even link your bank account if you're comfortable doing that, and it kind of helps import all of the data from the money that you've been spending and gives you a jumping off point. And then speaking of your own checking account, another really good tool would be your online banking from the bank that you use now. Most banks this day and age have an online banking tool that you can use. First Security does as well, and I actually utilize ours. It's really neat in that it allows you to track every transaction and categorize it. And then there is a money spending tool that tells you how much money in a certain time period you're spending in each of these categories, which really helps you get started. And just about every bank that you could have an account with should have a service of this type that is included in your account. So I recommend checking that out if you don't already. Saving is what we're going to talk about next. Like we said earlier, saving should be a part of every single budget. You have to start somewhere. And one of the really important things about when you're thinking about saving is think about what you're saving for. Everyone wants to save for something different, and you are, of course, always saving for that rainy day where you have an unexpected expense. But we also want to make sure we set aside money for what's important to us. Maybe we're not ready to go to college yet, and we want to save for that. Maybe you need a new vehicle sometime in the near future, and you want to set aside money for that down payment, or you're just planning on taking a nice vacation over spring break, and you want to be ready for that when it comes around. So just think about what it is that you are saving for. It really helps on the motivation factor. And it's really okay to start small. Everybody thinks, I don't really make a whole lot of money, I can't afford to save any of it. Whether we realize it or not, we always have room in our budget to save. Even if it's just one less Starbucks drink a week, which is approximately $5, put that into a savings account, that adds up over time so much more than you might expect. The point is simply to start. Even if it's just $5 a week, maybe you're only putting a few dollars a week in, and that's totally okay. Every time you get paid, put that little bit that you can into your savings account, and absolutely keep it separate from your general spending fund that you pay your bills out of. You would be amazed at how fast it adds up. And then always consider when your income level changes, you get a raise at work, maybe you get a windfall, some unexpected money. If you get a raise, make sure you increase how much you're saving, because you've gotten more money now, so you're able to set a little bit more aside. And if you do that over time, that'll allow you to increase your savings amount and, of course, the balance in that savings account. Talking about saving your windfalls, we get unexpected gifts sometimes. You get your tax refund bonus in, or you get a bonus from work around the holidays. It's really easy to want to go splurge on that money and buy that latest video game, get a new set of AirPods, upgrade our cell phone, whatever it is we might want. But it's really important to maybe take a step back and either save everything or at least save part of it. So when you do get extra unexpected funds, consider at least saving some of that back. That's another easy and important way to start saving. This screen is just a few spending and saving tips to think about on your journey. One of the things is called the 24-hour rule. What the 24-hour rule is, when you're out shopping and you're about to make an impulse purchase that you hadn't planned on, give it 24 hours. Don't buy the item today. Say you're going to think about it. It's quite amazing, actually, how when we give ourselves a little time, even just one day, to think about how much we really want or need that item, and is the cost worth it. Sometimes out of sight, out of mind really comes into play, and you realize you don't need it or want that item quite so bad. Another way to think about spending on these impulse or splurge type items is to equate the cost into time. People are often heard saying that we do not spend with our money, we spend with our time. So if you want to go out and purchase a new top and it's a $50 top, don't think about the fact that it costs $50, but think about how long did you have to work to earn that $50. Is the time you put in for that $50 worth that one piece of clothing? Another item to consider is the resources available to you as a college student or high school student. A lot of those things have been talked about in the presentations earlier today. You have a lot of free resources on campus, discounts as a student that you get at certain businesses, and a lot of free campus events where you get free meals. You can save yourself a lot of money by seeking these out and not spending your campus dollars on meals or by going out to eat. And then you also have the option, just kind of consider about your textbooks. Textbooks are really expensive. So if you don't need to keep them at the end of the semester, you might be able to trade them in or resell them back to recoup a little of those funds that you've spent. Setting alerts. If you have a bank, you probably have online banking and or a phone app, and most, I would say all banks have features where you can set alerts to either text you or email you when your account level gets to a certain balance, or if you have a transaction that hits your account for a certain amount. It's just a little reminder to kind of let you know where you are. You should be checking your account balances regularly for any irregularities or unrecognized purchases, but having alerts out there is a really good nudge to just remind you where you are. And then limit extra fees. Little tiny fees that we pay extra for things can add up over time. So it's an easy way to save, to just eliminate them. Sometimes if you have a utility bill to pay over the phone and you want to call in and pay with your credit card, those companies will charge you a surcharge. Maybe it's a flat few dollar fee, or they're going to charge you a percentage of your bill. You can avoid those extra fees by either writing them a check, paying it in person at an office, or setting it up to pay automatically online. So think about alternatives when you're paying bills that have fees attached to them where you would be able to pay it for free instead. When you're thinking about spending money on your debit card or your credit card, ATM fees, I see this happen a lot with our customers. If you use an ATM that is not associated with the card you have, you could end up paying anywhere from $3 to $5 or maybe up to $10 just for using that machine. So for instance, at First Security Bank, if you use a non-affiliated ATM, First Security Bank charges you a foreign ATM fee, and then the ATM that you use, because you're not a customer of that bank, they're going to charge you a fee as well. So instead of getting cash out of your checking account, you're going to pay an extra fee on that. So a $50 withdrawal could become a $55 withdrawal. And there's really no reason to have that extra fee just to take cash out of your account. If you don't have an account and you get your paycheck and you go cash it, if you cash it at a check cashing service or a place like Walmart, they're going to charge you a fee to cash that check. If you take that check to the bank that it was drawn on, like if your employer banks at Bank of America and the Bank of America logo is on that check, you can take that check to that bank and they're either going to have a significantly lower fee or they're going to cash that check for you for free even if you're not an account holder. So if you have a paper check that you need to cash, cashing it at the bank it's drawn on, or having a bank account of your own that you can deposit it into for free will really help because we work hard for our money and we don't want to give any of it away just to cash our checks. And at First Security, if your employer has checks drawn on First Security, we do not charge for check cashing for non-customers, so look out for that. And then if you have a bank account and you're able to set your bills to pay automatically, that is a really good way to make sure that you don't ever pay your bills late. So as long as you have your balance in your account the time that the bill is due, it's going to come out with you never having to do anything, and you know that bill is paid and taken care of. Okay, so we're going to move on now to credit scores and credit reports. This is a really important aspect of our financial well-being. A credit score, if you don't know, is a 3-digit number that is used to represent your credit worthiness to lenders. It is essentially your financial report card. So not to be the bearer of bad news, but even after you're done with high school and college, you still have a report card of sorts that you need to make sure you're getting good grades on. It's going to follow you your entire life. Your 3-digit credit score is calculated based on your credit history, and all of those details are found in your credit report. And we'll talk about the credit report in a little bit. And when we talk about your credit worthiness, what that means is the ability that you have to pay back a loan and the likeliness that you will pay it back. So lenders use this data to help make those decisions when you're applying for things like credit cards, mortgages, car loans, things like that. And the score that you have is going to help determine if you're going to be approved for the credit card or loan that you're applying for, and it can also help determine the interest rate that you get. Lower credit score holders will have a higher interest rate because that represents a higher risk for the lender. So the credit bureaus are also known as credit reporting agencies. It's kind of used interchangeably. There are a total of about 30 credit bureaus across the US, and that includes several small specialty credit bureaus. But the three major bureaus that we hear about all the time are Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Experian is the largest, but all three are widely trusted and considered industry standards for most lenders. And it's very important to know that the credit bureaus are not the ones deciding on your lending decision. Your credit history data is collected by the bureaus, and the information is given to lenders when you make a loan application, and that information is used by the lender to make the credit decision. The credit bureau's role is to collect the data and present it to a lender upon request. And a lot of things, a lot of important decisions when it comes to lending are made by these credit bureaus. So it can be a little scary knowing that they have all of this information out there on us, but it's really important to know that all of the credit bureaus, they are monitored and under regulation from the US government. There is a law called the Fair Credit Reporting Act that requires the credit bureaus to fairly and accurately report our information. So the government is out there looking to make sure that all of this is accurate, up to date, and fairly applied. So your credit score comes from what's in your credit report. So it's very important to know what is in your credit report. Your basic personal information, so that's going to be your full name and any aliases you might have had, which essentially would be like for a female if she were married and had a maiden name, all of those previous names that you used would be in there. Your birthday, your social security number, and possibly your address. You're also going to have your credit limits on your credit cards and your payment history for open accounts, and that's going to include credit cards, student loans, mortgages, car loans, basically any open debt that you have. If you have ever filed for bankruptcy or you have a lien against you, that is going to be in your credit report. And another important thing is anytime your credit is inquired upon, your recent credit inquiries is going to be a part of your report, and it can affect your score, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. Things that people might think are in their credit report but are not include arrests and convictions, so that's not going to be revealed as part of a credit check. Your cell phone payments, your traffic tickets and fines, and the balance in your checking and savings account. Another important thing is called your debt to income ratio, and your debt to income ratio is how much debt you owe versus how much money you make. Now, this information as a number is not included in your credit report, but when you are applying for a loan, you are more than likely required to report your income level as a part of the application. So the lender that you're applying through will be able to calculate your debt to income ratio if you are giving them your income information. So just understand they're not going to receive that in your credit report, but depending on the type of loan you're applying for, it may be able to be calculated. And when you're thinking about your checking and savings account balance, your checking and savings accounts are not part of your credit report, but I wanted to kind of take a step back. You may or may not have heard of a specialty credit reporting agency called ChexSystems. ChexSystems is considered specialty, and they go under the term consumer reporting agency. They are used by financial institutions regarding checking account holders, and they are essentially a smaller version of a credit bureau, but they just deal in accounts. So when you go to open a bank account, you are not having a full credit check run on you, but you are having a consumer reporting check run on you. So it's very important when you are opening and utilizing a bank account that you keep it in good standing. If you have ever had a checking account closed by a bank decision, you owe money to a bank on a closed account, or you have had a history of account abuse or account fraud, that information will get reported. It's important to know that it's not in a major credit bureau credit report, but that information does get reported between financial institutions via a specialty agency. So it's very important to keep in good standing with your bank. And I will also want to take just a minute before I forget to talk about your cell phone payments. Your cell phone payments are not part of your credit report, but if you default on your cell phone plan and you owe money and your account has been closed, that could be reported to collections, which then in turn would put it on your credit report. But an your active standing is not included. So when we talk about all the things that are in our credit report and it spits out this 3-digit score, it can be a little confusing as to how that 3-digit score applies to us. Now, there are several different models that the credit bureaus used to calculate your score based on what's in your credit history. We hear a lot these days about FICO scores. FICO stands for Fair Isaacs Company. It is an analysis company, and they have several models that they use, and they send their models to the credit bureaus. They're fast becoming an industry standard, so your FICO score could be used by any of the major credit reporting agencies. It's very common. So on the left, you see the most basic and common FICO score calculation. And one of the biggest chunks at 35% is your payment history. So that is weighed very heavily in your credit report. Other things that factor in are how much money you owe, your credit mix, the length of your credit history, and your new credit. So when we look at payment history, you see that that's the largest chunk. So that is going to weigh the most heavily on your credit score. And your payment history is if you make your payments on time. It's very, very important to make your payments on time. Now, when we talk about a late payment, if you have a payment that's due on the 3rd of the month, and for whatever reason, you don't get to pay it until the 5th of the month, whoever you're making that payment to might charge you a late fee, but a payment is not considered late on your credit report until it's at least 30 days past due. If you have not made a payment on a bill for a mortgage, credit card, personal loan, vehicle loan, and you are 30 days late, that is the point where those lenders start reporting that to the credit bureaus against you. One late payment of 30 days or more can drop a person's credit score 80 to 100 points. And that's a big jump. So your payment history and paying on time is a very important part of your credit to keep intact. But if you pay just a few days late, that's really not going to affect your credit. So the amounts owed is the next big chunk at 30%. If you have a credit card and the credit card limit is $3,000 and you owe $2,900, that is going to be looked at negatively because you have that much credit. You don't have that much credit on that card, and you also owe a significant amount. So make sure that when you have balances such as credit cards that you're not utilizing the entire balance. And when you have loans that are for a vehicle, let's say you have a $20,000 vehicle loan, how much money that you owe left on that loan is going to be part of your score. So the longer you have that loan and the more you pay it down, the less you'll owe, and that's going to look more positively on your score, which kind of folds us into new credit. So if you have a lot of new debt that you've accrued, that can negatively affect your credit score, at least temporarily, as long as you successfully pay the debts that you accrue in the timely manner that is expected of you. That will help keep your score in a positive. And then the length of time that you've had your credit history, it's a much smaller percentage in how it's weighed, but it is important. If you have a credit card that you have had open for 5 to 10 years, that credit history is available on your credit report. And especially if you've always paid that credit card on time, you always keep it below your limit, you don't utilize the entire limit, that's very positive. If you were to ever close that credit card, all of that history, it's going to start falling away. So it's important when you have accounts like credit cards that you keep open for several years, don't just close them unless you have a really, really good reason to close them, because closing a card with a long history deletes all of that positive history on your score, on your credit, and can lower your score a little bit. So keep those cards open. I wouldn't open several different cards that you don't intend to keep when you decide when to open a credit card and what type of credit card you're going to have. It's very, very important. Now, the next thing we really want to talk about is the credit score range. So we talked about how credit scores are a 3-digit number. They actually start at 350 and they go up to 850. I'm sorry, 300 and go to 850. Most people are going to fall in between 600 and 750. And anything that's above 700 is considered good. The national average credit score is 680, and the average credit score for the state of Arkansas is 657. So when you're thinking about, well, I don't have any credit history, I'm just starting out, where do I sit? For someone that doesn't have credit history to look at, and someone who is your age, about 18, 19 years old, you're probably going to be sitting at the low 600s. So essentially what that means is you don't have a whole lot of credit history to be able to give you a positive credit score, but you don't have any negative history either. So it kind of puts you in a fair range, and you have a basic credit score, and you're open to either make it go up or make it go down based on your actions. Someone who's in the fair range probably does not have a mortgage on their credit. They probably have not purchased a new car, and if you apply for a credit card, you're going to have a higher interest rate. Someone with poor credit probably would be not approved for most types of loans, and anyone in the good to excellent range is going to be approved, and the higher your credit score is, the better interest rate you're going to be able to negotiate for yourself. So we all have a right to know what's in our credit report, and it's very important that we do know what's in our credit report. So you have the right to access your credit. The website annualcreditreport.com will give you a copy of your credit report from all 3 major credit bureaus once a year. No cost to you. And it's important to know that checking your credit does not affect your credit score. We mentioned earlier that inquiries into your credit can affect your credit score. That does not include you as an individual checking your credit. That does not affect you in a negative way. If you have special circumstances, such as you have experienced identity theft or fraud, you have been denied credit, or you're applying for welfare, then you have the right to access your credit report more than once a year. So there are certain circumstances where the credit bureaus will give you your report for free more than once a year. You also, if you find anything on your credit report that is inaccurate, you have the right to dispute it directly with the credit bureaus. And 7 years is considered the magic number of how long an account is going to be on your report. So even if you, let's say you went to Rent-A-Center and you bought a piece of furniture, you paid it, you made all the payments, you paid it off, and it's yours. Even after you settle that account, it is going to remain on your report for 7 years, even after it's closed. If you paid it in agreement, it's going to be a good positive history for you. But if you had issues while you were making that, you missed payments, even if you missed one payment in the first year that you have that account, that missed payment is going to be on your credit report for several years to come. So just consider that when you're making these payments. A lot of times you have the opportunity to have credit monitoring through either a credit card that you have, your bank, or websites that you may have heard of, such as creditkarma.com. So for instance, at First Security, we have a program that you can add onto your checking account that includes a full credit report every 3 months, and includes a few other bonuses. So you pay the bank $5.95 and you get access to the service. You get your not just your credit score, but your entire report every 90 days, which is really a good deal, because not only do you get a full credit report, but you get it from all 3 bureaus. And it's really important to know what every single bureau is reporting, because when you're applying for a loan, maybe to get a new car, that dealership, they may only run a check through one credit bureau instead of all 3. So you need to know what all 3 bureaus are reporting on you. One thing I do caution you about are third-party websites. And when we say third-party, we mean people that aren't associated directly with a credit bureau. They will offer you your credit report for free. There are websites that allow you to access your credit score for free, but that will not include a copy of your credit report. It's just a score. So it tells you maybe where your score's sitting at, but not the entire credit history, which the history is really important so that you can know what balances you have, what accounts are showing up, and you can look and see if maybe there's an account that you didn't open. If you had identity theft, you need to be able to watch for those items. One of the most common websites we hear about and is very popular is called Credit Karma. Credit Karma is a legitimate free site. You can trust it if you want to utilize them. One of the important things to know about Credit Karma, though, is that it only pulls your data from TransUnion and Equifax. Your credit report from Experian cannot be accessed through Credit Karma. So that goes back to making sure that you can access your report from all 3 bureaus. You need to know what all 3 of them know and have on you. So I just want to talk about a few things that we've maybe touched on a little bit already about building and maintaining your credit score and starting off on a positive note. It's really important that when you become 18, you start building a positive credit history. You don't want to be starting negatively, but you also don't want to have going into your 20s, no credit history. So you want to make sure that you start in some way, shape, or form. One of the ways to start building a good credit history for someone who doesn't have credit is to apply for a secure credit card. The way a secure credit card works is the financial institution will give you a credit limit of, say, $500. And in turn, you will give them $500 as collateral. So if for any reason you're unable to make your payments on that card, they will cover that with the balance you have given them. So you have essentially secured your debt on that credit card, and it'll keep you from defaulting on the credit card because any money that you would owe is already in hand with that institution to be able to pay the balance off. First Security Bank does offer secure credit cards. We have a really good interest rate too. When you're looking at applying for your very first credit card, the interest rate is very important. Credit cards are one of the highest interest rate accounts that you can hold, and they can very quickly spiral out of control. Credit cards right now from major financial institutions, they're going to be about probably 25 to 27%. And if you think about, you just put one $10 purchase from McDonald's on your credit card, depending on how long it takes you to pay that balance off, you could be paying 3 times the amount of that meal. I would recommend definitely looking into something like a secure credit card. First Security credit cards are 9.99% interest. They're not variable. They are intact. It's been that rate for a long time. It's probably not going to change. So when you do look at a credit card, make sure you know if it's variable and that rate could go up or down based on the current market. Don't apply for new credit too often. Having new debt applied is in a short amount of time can negatively affect your credit. Also, when you are out looking for something like a new car, you may visit several dealerships to try to decide what's the best car for you. So if you find a car that you like at a certain dealership and you're looking at prices and financing, they can run your credit to check what interest rate you might get by financing and purchasing that car from that dealership. Well, let's say you're not really sure and you're like, well, I'm going to look around, and you go the very same day to another car dealer and they do the same thing. Well, that's 2 inquiries on your credit. One very important thing to know is in a short amount of time, let's say a week or 2 weeks, if you have the same number of inquiries several inquiries from the same type of lender, that is considered 1 inquiry into your credit. It's called a hard pull. And this is kind of a way for the credit bureaus to say, hey, we understand that you may be checking with different lenders when you're purchasing one type of item. So it allows you to explore financing from different people. Now, if, for instance, you went and had your credit checked from a car dealership, and then you applied for a credit card, and then you went and financed a mattress from Mattress Firm, that's 3 different types of lenders, 3 different types of accounts, 3 different credit inquiries. So it's important to know the difference between having your credit checked by 3 different automobile dealerships and 3 different lenders entirely, lender types. So having your credit checked several times by different lenders in a short period of time can negatively affect your credit. Just as if you went to the mattress place and you got a credit card and you got that car, you have already you have accumulated in a short time a good amount of debt, and that is also a negative aspect of it. Can be negatively affected on your credit. So when you're applying for a credit card or a car, make sure you're doing it in gradual steps. When you're studying your credit report and looking at it, make sure that everything looks correct. Your social security number, your name, all of the accounts that you've had need to be correct. If there's anything that's wrong, if you're showing that you've missed a payment and you know that that's not correct, definitely have them corrected. All of the major credit bureaus, if you go to their website, there is a dispute resolution center directly on the website. You can do everything online. And once again, because it's very, very important, don't miss your payments. I also want to touch a little bit on Experian Credit Boost, because we hear a lot about that. There's commercials all over the place these days about boosting your credit with Experian. And is this legitimate? Yes, it is legitimate. The Experian Credit Bureau will allow you to submit your utility bills and your cell phone bill history to be applied to your credit score. We talked about earlier that things like this are not on your credit, but if you have a positive payment history with a utility company like your water or your electric and your cell phone company, some cell phone companies will allow you to submit that data to the Credit Bureau Experian, and that positive history can boost your score by about 10 points. Now, 10 points doesn't seem like very much, but if you think that this is an option for you, that 10 points could push you into a category that's a little bit higher and put you in a new credit score range, which can help you get either approved where you wouldn't have been approved or get you a better interest rate. One thing to remember is that it is only going to be through the Experian Credit Bureau. And then credit utilization is another really good thing. We talked about having earlier a credit card with a limit of $3,000. It's very important that you don't utilize too much of that credit limit. Just because you have $3,000 that you can spend doesn't mean you should. It is recommended that you only utilize 30% of your available credit. So if you had a $3,000 credit card limit, that would equate to about $300 if my head math is good. It's important to utilize your credit cards and make your payments on time, but it's also important to leave available credit on the table for emergencies, and it's also a very positive reflection on your credit score.